Peter Savodnik is a journalist with the New York Times Magazine, based in New York, who has reported from the former Soviet Union, India, China, the Middle East, Europe, and across the United States. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Thank you very much, Joyce. It's good to be here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Peter, you have written for the Atlantic Monthly, the New York Times Magazine, GQ, one of my husband's favorite magazines, Business Week, Harper's, The New Yorker, I can't even say all these, Condé Nast, Traveler, Wired, with W, Time, the New York Review of Books, the Washington Post, and Commentary, among other venues. How did this all come about?
Well, after college, I got into newspapering. I had a job in New York. Then I found another newspaper job, and then another, and it just snowballed. And then I started freelancing for magazines, and here we are.
One thing does lead to another, doesn't it?
It does.
It's amazing. If only people would realize that. They stopped just before they were about to do something great, and you didn't, so good for you. You just shot your first documentary about a man who travels from his home in Manchester, England, to the southernmost tip of Sri Lanka to find the hotel where his brother was murdered and his brother's girlfriend gang-raped. The New Yorker magazine has just posted this movie on their site. Where did you get the idea for this documentary, and is it based on a true story?
It is. Well, the story came about, or came to my attention, because I was living at the time in Colombo, Sri Lanka, with my wife, who was working there, and we knew about it. Everyone knew about it there, and it had been reported pretty widely in Britain, although it was known almost not at all in the United States. And it was obviously a very important and powerful story. It was a terrible story, and it was one that I felt could be told in a more vivid and more compelling way, one that really got inside the feelings, the experiences of the people who were experiencing it most intensely, namely the family of the deceased man. So I found Nasser Sheikh. He's the older brother of the gentleman who was killed in Manchester, and that's how it all started.
Well, I'd like to find out later in the interview where people can find that documentary to watch. Is it on YouTube?
It's on YouTube now, or it's at the New Yorker's site. You can go to YouTube and just punch in New Yorker and Sheikh, the last name, which is also part of the name of the movie. So just punch in New Yorker and then SHAIKH, and the movie should come up.
Great. I'm going to watch it right after this interview. You have traveled extensively. Tell us about your travels.
Well, I was living for a few years in Moscow, where I was reporting a good bit. And while I was in Russia, I had the opportunity to travel a great deal around the former Soviet Union, which is, in my humble opinion, the greatest place to travel around in the world, simply because it's an adventure unto itself. That is, just getting from point A to B is an adventure, and I love that. I found it intoxicating, and then it was the experience of just going places that I didn't really understand, that seemed to me entirely alien, but in a very, very exciting and almost unfathomable kind of way. So once that started in earnest, I really couldn't stop.
Well, it's a great learning opportunity for you to be all over the world and to see how other people live, and I think it's wonderful. I imagine you plan on continuing to make movies or documentaries. What subjects will you be focusing on, and what is your target audience?
Well, we've just launched a new media group. It's called Stateless Media, and yes, we'll be making a lot of movies, and we'll be covering everything. And our target audience is everyone. Not quite everyone, I would say everyone who has ever read a magazine article or a newspaper. People who are engaged in the world or with the world, but who feel as if stories that they would like to know more about, to read more about, or to watch are not available. We'll be covering those stories and going everywhere. And that could mean New York or Germany, where we're now filming, or it could entail South Asia, where we'll be next month, or the Middle East, where we'll be going back to in October. So there is nowhere that we won't go, and there's nothing that we won't cover.
Wow, what an attitude and what an inspiration for other people. I don't know that I can do what you're doing because it is, it's all-encompassing for you, that you're going everywhere and anywhere at any time. I think that's great. And let me know when you go, and we'll have you on again so we could talk about those experiences.
Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure.
Well, as of late, there's been a lot of controversy about journalists and journalism. How would you describe the state of journalism in the United States today?
Well, that's a complicated question. I think that the only thing that can be said for sure about the state of journalism is that it is in flux. We don't really know what's coming next. What's interesting is that there is a great deal of inertia in places like New York and Washington, where you have these vested interests in the way things have been. We're talking about magazines and newspapers and television networks. But the reality is that the media world is far more diffuse and far more complex than that. And I think that what's exciting is that the market is finally beginning to respond to that. So we don't exactly know what's going to be coming next, but we do know that the media landscape in 5 or 10 years is not going to look at all the way it looks right now.
That was my next question. So whether you think the news will become more balanced, I do agree with you, and you've confirmed my belief that the people are starting to respond a little bit more on an intellectual level to what they're hearing. Just because somebody says it on TV or on the radio doesn't make it so, and I think people are more inclined to check things out. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that, look, everywhere in the country there is a growing skepticism, and while this may be very upsetting to entrenched interests, it's a very healthy thing, in my opinion, for democracy and frankly, for the media. We don't know what's going to come next, as I mentioned, but as long as it's fueled by a widespread desire for debate and facts and something which is better than, more meaningful than caricature and polemic, we're in for something very good. In the interim, we may be a little unsettled. We may not quite know what to make of the conversation, but I think in the longer term we'll come out stronger, better.
I agree. I think that's usually what happens, but it seems to be fueled by half the people in the United States anyway are on one side of the fence, and the other half are on the other side of a fence. And so if you're in one political party, you're going to always, no matter what, support that person in that party. And if you're on another side, and they're going to do the same. And it just seems like it's just totally difficult to see where anyone will cross over the aisle to really see what is important and what should be fought for and what is democratic in the way of helping people all over the United States. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I actually think that things are far less polarized than the government or various elected officials or the media might have us believe. Most Americans, most people could probably agree on all kinds of basic principles having to do with civil liberties and freedom and our relationship between the individual and the state, commerce, markets, and so forth. I think that we increasingly get tangled up in arguments about things on the margins, and these things tend to take on or acquire a kind of significance that they don't really merit. And other people, I think, exploit that to various ends.
Yes, I agree, and that's a good perspective, Peter. Thank you for telling me that. Well, what an interesting life you live. I'm sure our listeners would like to know how to find you, and whatever information you can give us, then please, let's do it.
Well, the best way to follow what's going on is to like us at Facebook. It's Stateless Media, or to follow us on Twitter at Stateless Media. And we'll be posting all of our upcoming developments, films, projects there. And I should add that stateless is not an explicitly political notion. It's meant to simply convey a sense of total freedom, an idea that we are unanchored to any place, but we are committed to the news everywhere.
Wait, could you spell stateless? Because people
it's,
hear the word, they to know
of
how to
course.
get there. Yes, go ahead.
STATELESS and then MEDIA. So Stateless Media.
Okay, they might have not gotten that correctly, and I want them to find you. Well, thank you so much for this interview, and this is Dr. Joyce Knudsen chatting with Peter Savodnik on ImageMaker Incorporated Media.